Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling happiness.
Yeah.
Not just happiness.
Right. More like well-being, I guess, or like
Yeah, sort of
fulfilling.
a flourishing life. And we've got this really interesting mix of sources for this one. We've got ancient Stoics like Epictetus,
Marcus Aurelius, of course.
Marcus Aurelius, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, we jump all the way up to like Brene Brown.
Yeah, and Yuval Noah Harari even. It's a pretty wild mix.
It is a wild mix. And I think it'll be cool to see what the connections are and how these different thinkers across time have tackled this, this pretty fundamental question.
Yeah, the big one, right? How to be happy.
How to be happy, yeah. So I think maybe a good place to start is,
Well, where do you want to go first?
let's start with Ryan Holiday and his book, The Obstacle is the Way.
Okay, yeah. So he's got this really interesting idea, or not even his idea really, but about how obstacles, things we usually try to avoid, are actually like opportunities. Yeah, opportunities for growth, exactly. And he gets a lot of this from the Stoics. Think about Marcus Aurelius. Imagine being Roman emperor.
Yeah.
Plagues, wars, constant betrayal.
You would think that would be the key to happiness, right?
Yep.
Roman emperor?
You'd think so, but no. And yet Aurelius, he saw these things, all these terrible things, as chances to practice
Virtue.
Yeah, virtue and resilience.
And become a better person.
A better leader, better human being. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's like he flipped the script, right? Instead of being like, oh, this is why I'm miserable, it's like, this is making me a better person.
Totally, yeah. And it's not about like pretending the difficulty isn't there. It's more like within that obstacle is that seed of opportunity. So like instead of asking like, why me? You could ask, what can I learn? Or how can I use this to grow?
Okay, so, I mean, it's easy to say that, right? But how do we actually put that into practice? Because, when you're in the middle of something really frustrating, that's a really hard mindset to have.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing Holiday suggests is, when you hit a frustrating situation, you ask yourself, wouldn't it be better to just, be resourceful instead of angry? Like imagine, getting cut off in traffic. So instead of like, road rage, you take a breath and you're like, oh, okay, I've got this extra time now. Maybe I can catch up on that podcast.
That's great. It's
Right.
like you're shifting your focus from what you can't control, like the other driver, to what you can control, which is your own reaction.
Exactly. And you can apply that kind of shift of finding the opportunity and the obstacle to, well, really anything, big challenges or small ones.
Yeah, it's like training your mind to kind of see the world differently. Okay, so that's, reframing obstacles, but what about those situations where it's not just frustrating, it's like truly awful? And I think that's where Viktor Frankl comes in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, that book, it came out of his experience in Nazi concentration camps.
Which is just unbelievable. I mean, the horrors he endured, lost his entire family, and yet he came out of it with this like unshakable belief in this human capacity to find meaning in the darkest of places.
And that's incredible, right? It's not like he went through that and came out and was like, oh, it was fine, everything was okay, but that he was able to find meaning
Yeah.
in that suffering.
And what's interesting is he actually observed that even in those like inhumane conditions, the people who had a why, a reason to live, a purpose that transcended their suffering, they were more likely to survive.
Like they had something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Some reason to keep going, even when everything was so terrible. But I mean, how do we find that why? How do we find our own purpose, especially when things feel really chaotic or just overwhelming?
Well, Frankl, he believed meaning isn't something we just like stumble upon. It's something we create. It's about identifying your values, your strengths, and then asking, how can I use these to make like even a small positive contribution?
So it's about connecting your actions, even in those really tough times, to something bigger than yourself, right? I mean, it could be family, community,
Sure.
a cause you care about,
Right.
or even just living a life of integrity.
Right. And that search for that meaning, it's not like a one-time thing. It's a process. Your why, it might change over time as you grow, as you learn. But
Yeah.
the key is to actually engage in that search.
And I think that's empowering, right? Because even when things are really hard, you have that choice. You can either give in to despair or you can actually seek out that meaning, that purpose.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about reframing obstacles, finding meaning. Let's shift gears a bit to a more present moment focus with Eckhart Tolle and his book, The Power of Now. He talks a lot about how much of our suffering is because we're dwelling on the past or we're worrying about the future. And that takes us away from the only place life actually exists, right here, right now.
Right. And Tolle, he has this idea of the pain body, which is basically all the accumulated emotional pain we carry around from our past, like an energy field. It clings to you and feeds on all those negative thoughts and emotions.
So it's not just in our heads, it's like a real thing.
That's how he describes it. And he says, this pain body keeps us stuck, even when whatever caused the pain is, long gone.
So it's like constantly replaying like old hurts or those negative scenarios in your head over and over.
Yeah, and to break free from this pain body, Tolle really emphasizes presence, like bringing your full awareness to this moment right now. And when you're fully present, he argues, that pain body, it loses its grip because it can't exist in the light of conscious awareness.
So it's about shifting our focus from that internal chatter to the actual sensations of the present moment, right?
Yeah.
Feeling your breath, hearing the sounds around you, just being in the here and now.
Exactly. And that's not to say you just ignore difficult emotions, but it's about accepting whatever is there in this moment without judging it, and then choosing how you want to respond.
Like you're creating that space between the stimulus, whether it's a difficult emotion or a tough situation, and your reaction to it. And in that space, you have the power to choose.
Yeah. And that practice of presence, it can really profoundly affect your happiness because it frees you from that past and the anxieties of the future.
Like you can finally step out of your head and just experience life in all its fullness, including the difficult moments. Okay, so we've talked about reframing obstacles, finding meaning, being present. Let's talk about another big one, detaching from that constant chatter in our minds. And Michael Singer, in his book, The Untethered Soul, really gets into this.
Yeah, Singer calls this chatter the inner voice. It's that constant stream of thoughts and judgments and worries, like having a mental roommate that just won't be quiet.
I think we all have that inner critic, always analyzing, always judging, and so exhausting. But Singer says we can actually detach from that voice. How is that even possible?
Well, it's not about silencing it or pretending it isn't there. It's more about just observing it without judgment, recognizing that you are not your thoughts.
So creating some space between you and your thoughts, almost like you're stepping back and watching them go by, like clouds or like a movie playing.
Exactly. And that shift can be so liberating because when you realize that you're not your thoughts, you're free from like the tyranny of your own mind.
It's like you can step out of that drama that's going on in your head and see things more clearly. And just think about how much energy we waste on that inner chatter. What if we could use that energy for something, more positive, something that's actually fulfilling?
And that's really what Singer is getting at. It's not about suppressing thoughts, but about changing how you relate to them. You learn to observe them, but you don't get, caught up in their stories. And that frees up so much mental and emotional energy.
Like you're creating space within yourself and a sense of inner peace that doesn't depend on what's happening outside of you.
Okay. Speaking of managing that inner world, let's talk about Susan David and her work on emotional agility. She's this psychologist who has really figured out how to deal with your emotions, even the difficult ones, in a really skillful way.
Yeah, her work is about building resilience by learning how to respond to your emotions healthfully and constructively. And she really emphasizes that emotions, even the negative ones, they're valuable, they're information.
So not about getting rid of them, but understanding them. What kind of information?
They can signal things like unmet needs, beliefs, or even creative impulses. Like anger could tell you a boundary has been crossed, while sadness might mean you need connection or self-care.
And a lot of times, our first instinct is to try to push those feelings away, to distract ourselves. David's suggesting a different approach, though, right? Right. She calls it emotional agility. And it basically involves 4 things. First, notice your emotions. Pay attention to how you're feeling, physically, emotionally, but without judging. Second, label them. Actually putting a name to what you're feeling can help you understand it. And then third, accept it. Recognizing all emotions are valid, they have a purpose, even the unpleasant ones. And then finally, choose your response. Instead of reacting impulsively, you take a moment to consider how you want to respond in a way that aligns with your values and your goals.
I love that. It's like you're the CEO of your own emotional life. You're not letting your emotions run the show, but you're also not trying to suppress them. You're learning to work with them.
That's a great way to put it. And that practice of emotional agility can be really powerful. It lets you experience the whole range of human emotions without being swept away by them.
Like you're building resilience from the inside out. Okay, so let's shift to another fascinating concept, mindset. Carol Dweck, in her book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, she talks about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. and how they can really affect your happiness and success.
Yeah, so Dweck, her research shows that people with a fixed mindset, they believe their abilities are just, innate, and unchangeable. While people with a growth mindset believe those abilities can be developed through effort and learning.
So whether you think intelligence and talent are just something you're born with or something you can cultivate, but how does that relate to happiness?
Well, if you have a fixed mindset, you tend to avoid challenges because you're scared of failure, which you see as reflecting on your limitations. And you might give up easier when you hit obstacles thinking, I just don't have what it takes.
But someone with a growth mindset, they see those challenges as opportunities to grow. Setbacks are temporary, and you can learn from them. They're not a sign of failure.
Exactly. And what's amazing is Dweck's research has actually shown that simply believing you can change leads to better outcomes in all sorts of areas, academics, relationships, even physical health.
So believing in your ability to grow and learn actually makes you happier and more successful. That's wild.
It is. And the good news is mindset isn't fixed. You can cultivate a growth mindset. One way is to focus on the process of learning and development, not on some fixed trait.
So instead of saying, I'm not good at math, you'd say, I'm learning to get better at math.
Right. It's a subtle shift in language, but it can make a huge difference in how you approach challenges.
It's about celebrating the effort, the progress, rather than focusing on just, innate ability. Okay, let's change gears a bit to something a little more practical. Relationships. Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has this really interesting, concrete approach to building strong relationships. And we all know relationships are a huge part of happiness.
Right. And Covey, he has this great concept of the emotional bank account, which is basically a metaphor for the trust and goodwill you build in relationships.
So like a regular bank account, but you're not depositing money, you're depositing kindness and understanding and support.
Yeah. And just like a financial bank account, you can make deposits and withdrawals. So deposits happen when you're kind, respectful, honest, you keep your promises. And then withdrawals happen when you're unkind or disrespectful, you break promises, or you just act in a way that erodes trust.
And if you keep making withdrawals without any deposits, you're going to end up with an overdraft. And that's a strained relationship.
Exactly. So Covey, he says you got to make regular deposits to keep that account healthy. It could be small acts of kindness, like listening to someone, offering encouragement, even remembering important dates, birthdays.
So being intentional in how you interact with people, showing up for them in a meaningful way.
Right. And it's not always big gestures. It's the little things, that add up over time. Just a text message, a thank you note, a hug when someone's down. These small things, they can make a huge difference.
It's like you're weaving a tapestry of connection, and that becomes a source of strength and support in your life. Okay, so let's zoom out for a minute and think about the role of technology in all of this. Because Yuval Noah Harari, in his book 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, has some really, sobering thoughts about the challenges we're facing in this digital age.
Yeah. Harari's argument is that while technology has brought us incredible advances, it also poses some serious risks to our well-being. He's especially concerned about it leading to feelings of irrelevance and disorientation.
And it makes sense, right? We're constantly bombarded with information, notifications that can feel really overwhelming and make it hard to focus. So is he saying we should just ditch technology altogether?
No, not really. He acknowledges the benefits, but stresses how important it is to use it mindfully and intentionally. We need to be aware of the downsides and then make conscious choices about how we interact with it.
So be the master of your tech, not the slave to it, right?
Yeah.
But how do you do that in this world that's so hyper-connected?
Well, one thing you can do is create boundaries. Set aside specific times for email, for social media, turn off notifications, have tech-free zones in your home.
Reclaim your attention. Decide how you want to spend your time and energy.
Exactly. And also be mindful of what you're consuming online. Is it uplifting or is it just draining you?
It's like you're curating your mental diet, choosing to nourish your mind with positive content rather than junk food for the soul.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with food, a balanced approach is key. You can enjoy the benefits without letting it take over your life.
It's about finding that sweet spot where technology makes your life better without diminishing your well-being. Okay, this has been fascinating. I'm already seeing some connections between all these seemingly very different thinkers. But I feel like we've covered a lot. What are the key takeaways for our listeners to start applying in their own lives?
One thing that stands out to me is choice. Whether it's reframing obstacles with Ryan Holiday, finding meaning with Viktor Frankl, or detaching from those thoughts with Michael Singer, or even navigating emotions with Susan David, it all comes down to recognizing that we actually have a choice in how we respond.
So it's not about waiting for happiness to just happen,
Mm.
but actively building those inner resources that let you experience it, even when things are hard.
Right. It's about recognizing you have more control over your happiness than you might think. And it's not about denying the challenges, but about giving yourself the tools to navigate them in a way that keeps you grounded and at peace.
It's like building an inner sanctuary, a place of peace and strength that you can always access, no matter what's going on outside. And we've explored so many ways to build that. Reframing obstacles, finding meaning, practicing mindfulness, cultivating gratitude, nurturing relationships, finding your purpose, challenging those negative thoughts, being kind to yourself, taking care of your physical health.
And don't forget joy and playfulness. Life isn't just about checking things off a list. It's about savoring the moment and just having fun.
Right. Remembering that we're human beings, not just human doings. And being human means experiencing the whole range of life, including the lighthearted stuff. But we've got more to cover.
We do. More insights into how to cultivate that lasting happiness.
So stay tuned. We're just getting started on this happiness deep dive.
So, picking up where we left off, I think it's really interesting to look at Aristotle. He really emphasized virtue, as a path to happiness. In his Nicomachean Ethics, he talks about this idea of eudaimonia.
Which is often translated as flourishing, right? Or like living well.
Right, and it's not about, just fleeting pleasures, but about really living in alignment with your values, your purpose.
So it's more than just like fun and excitement. It's about a life that's meaningful and fulfilling.
Exactly. And Aristotle believed that you achieve this kind of happiness, this eudaimonia, through cultivating virtues like courage, justice, wisdom, temperance. He also talked about finding the golden mean, which is basically finding balance in all areas of your life.
Not being perfect, but just finding that harmonious balance in your thoughts, your actions, how you relate to others.
Exactly. And for Aristotle, this wasn't a one-time thing. This pursuit of virtue, it's a lifelong journey. Requires constant self-reflection, effort. It's a choice, not just something that happens to you.
This reminds me of Epictetus, the Stoic. He wrote the Enchiridion. And he had this idea about really focusing on what you can control, which is basically your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions.
Right. Everything else is external. It's noise. Epictetus believed that those external events, you can't really control them. And trying to just leads to frustration, suffering. True freedom comes from accepting what is and focusing on living virtuously, regardless of the circumstances.
He has that famous quote, right? There was only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. It's like a reminder to let go of what you can't control, focus on what you can.
And it ties back to that idea of resilience, that we were talking about earlier. It's not that challenges go away. It's that you learn to deal with them in a way that preserves your inner peace, keeps you moving forward.
Okay, so we've talked about mindset, resilience, presence, emotional agility, strong relationships, living a virtuous life. It's a lot. Where do we even begin? What are some concrete steps we can take today to actually start cultivating happiness?
It's a great question, and it can be a little overwhelming trying to do everything at once. Start small. Focus on building one habit at a time.
Like a happiness buffet, we don't have to try everything at once. Pick and choose what resonates with you, what feels manageable. So what are some good places to start?
Mindfulness is a fantastic foundation. It's that practice of bringing your full attention to the present moment, no judgment. It could be formal meditation, or just taking a few minutes each day to focus on your breath, notice the sensations in your body, just observe your surroundings.
Just hitting the pause button on that busy mind, right? Giving yourself a moment to just be. I know I get so caught up in doing that I forget to just be present.
It's easy to do in our world, but even a few minutes of that each day can really make a difference. Reduces stress, improves focus. You even start to notice and appreciate the little joys more. Speaking of which, gratitude is another powerful practice. Sounds simple, but sometimes the simplest things are the most effective.
I know, it sounds almost too easy. Right. Just be grateful. But it really does work.
It really does, and there are so many ways to practice it. Keep a gratitude journal. Each day, write down 3 things you're grateful for, no matter how small. A sunny day, a good meal, a kind word from a friend.
It's like training your brain to look for the good instead of getting stuck in the negative. What else can you do?
Express gratitude directly to others. Thank you notes. telling someone you appreciate them, a genuine smile can make someone's day.
You're not just experiencing gratitude then, you're spreading it, and it creates that ripple effect, makes the other person feel good.
Exactly. And even if you don't write it down or say it out loud, just noticing and appreciating those good things in your life, taking a moment to savor a sunset, a cup of coffee, a hug, it can change your whole outlook.
It's about cultivating that attitude of gratitude, seeing the world through a lens of abundance,
Yeah.
of beauty. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the internal stuff. What about things we can do to improve our external circumstances? Our environment can have a big impact on happiness, right?
Absolutely. And one of the most important things you can do is invest in your relationships. We're social creatures. Meaningful connections are essential to our well-being.
We already touched on Covey's idea of the emotional bank account, right? Making those deposits of kindness, respect, understanding. What else can we do to nurture those relationships?
Learning to really listen is crucial. Active listening. Tuning into what the other person is saying. No judgment, no interrupting. Putting aside your own thoughts, your own agenda, just being present with them.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of waiting for your turn to speak, think about what you're going to say next. But really listening is about being there with the other person, hearing their words, but also their tone, their body language, everything.
Exactly. When you feel truly heard, understood, it creates a connection, an intimacy that's so valuable.
It's like saying to that person, you matter. Your thoughts and feelings are important to me.
And that message can be powerful, both for the person hearing it and the one saying it. Another thing is to make time for those connections. Quality time. It's easy to let that slip away when life gets busy, but even small gestures can make a difference.
So being intentional about creating those opportunities to connect, even if it's just a quick call, a shared meal, a walk.
Exactly. And don't underestimate shared experiences. Doing something fun, engaging together, playing a game, a concert, trying a new restaurant, creates memories, strengthens those bonds.
You're building a shared history, a tapestry of experiences that connects you. Okay, so we talked about mindfulness, gratitude, relationships. But what about finding your purpose, your why? We talked about this a little with Viktor Frankl, but I'd love to explore it more.
That's a great point. Finding your purpose, what gives your life meaning and direction, can be a huge source of happiness.
It can also feel really daunting. How do you even begin to figure that out? It feels like such a big question.
Well, it might help to think of purpose not as this one big thing, but more as a series of smaller passions, values that are connected. Think about what you're drawn to, what makes you feel alive, joyful, what gets you fired up to make a difference.
Like piecing together a puzzle. Looking for those clues in your interests, your values, your experiences.
Right. And it doesn't have to be something huge, changing the world. It could be being a loving parent, a supportive friend, volunteering in your community.
It's about finding ways to align your actions with your values, using your gifts and talents to make a positive impact, whatever that looks like for you.
And remember, purpose can change over time. As you grow, learn. It's an ongoing exploration, not a fixed destination. Just stay curious, keep experimenting.
Like a treasure hunt, following the clues to your own unique treasure, which is a life of meaning and purpose. Okay, before we go on to some more practical steps, let's address the elephant in the room. Negative thoughts. We all have them, and they can be a real drag on happiness.
Oh, absolutely. Those negative thoughts, like a broken record, just playing those same limiting beliefs, self-criticisms over and over again.
So how do we deal with those?
One of the most effective strategies is cognitive reframing. It's about challenging those negative thoughts, reframing them in a more positive, realistic light.
So not pretending everything is perfect, but learning to see things differently. How does that work?
Let's say you have a thought like, I'm a failure. First, notice it. Acknowledge how it makes you feel. Then challenge it. Ask yourself, is this really true? What evidence do I have? Is there a more balanced way to look at this? What would I say to a friend who is thinking this?
It's like putting your thoughts on trial. See if they hold up.
Exactly. Often when you really look at those negative thoughts, they're based on distorted thinking, outdated beliefs.
So you reframe them. Instead of I'm a failure, it becomes I made a mistake and I can learn from it.
Right. And it takes practice. Like any skill, you get better with time. But the more you practice, the better you get at catching those thoughts and changing them into something more positive, empowering.
Like building mental muscles. Choosing thoughts that help you, not hold you back.
Exactly. And this can have a big impact on your happiness because you're breaking free from those negative patterns that can keep you stuck in self-doubt and unhappiness.
Okay, so challenging those thoughts. But what about when you're really struggling, feeling down, overwhelmed?
That's where self-compassion comes in. Treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding you would offer to a friend.
We're often so much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else.
It's true. Self-compassion is about giving yourself grace, especially when you need it most. And there are three key parts to it. One is self-kindness, being warm and understanding instead of harshly critical. Then there's common humanity, remembering we're all imperfect, everyone makes mistakes, suffering is part of life, you're not alone. And finally, mindfulness, observing your thoughts, feelings without judgment, acknowledging your pain but not getting lost in it.
So you're acknowledging you're worthy of love and compassion, even when you mess up, even when you don't meet your own expectations.
Exactly. It's not about making excuses, it's about recognizing you're human, you're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay.
It's that same grace and understanding you'd offer to a friend who's going through a tough time.
And research shows it can really make a difference. Self-compassion can reduce stress, anxiety, build resilience, even improve your physical health.
Like you're creating a safe, supportive space inside yourself to heal and grow.
Okay, we've talked a lot about mental, emotional well-being, but we can't forget about taking care of our bodies too. That's so important. Our physical health is totally connected to our mental and emotional well-being. Take care of your body, you're taking care of your mind and spirit.
So what are the key things we need to do?
The basics are key. Healthy diet, regular exercise, enough sleep, those are the cornerstones.
I know we hear it all the time, but it makes such a difference. When I'm eating well, exercising, I have more energy, better sleep, I just feel happier.
It's true. And it's not about being perfect, sticking to some rigid plan. It's about finding what works for you, incorporating healthy habits that you can sustain and even enjoy.
So finding ways to move your body that you actually like, whether it's dancing, hiking, swimming, even just a walk, eating foods that nourish you and make you feel good, and creating a relaxing bedtime routine to get that good sleep.
Exactly. And remember, small changes add up. Taking the stairs, extra veggies at dinner, going to bed 15 minutes earlier, it all makes a difference.
It's about making those choices that support your well-being. And when you feel good physically, it makes it so much easier to feel good mentally and emotionally. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of practical steps, but we can't forget to just enjoy life.
Absolutely. Life isn't all about checking things off a to-do list. It's about savoring the moment, finding those little joys, making time for what brings you pleasure.
Nurturing your inner child, being playful, having fun. What are some ways we can do that?
Well, it's different for everyone, right? Spending time in nature, listening to music, dancing, reading, watching a funny movie, playing with your pets, hobbies, whatever lights you up.
Making time for activities that bring you joy, that make you feel alive. Bringing some fun into your day.
Exactly. And don't feel guilty about it. Taking time for yourself, doing things you enjoy. Joy is an essential ingredient in a happy life.
Giving yourself permission to play, to be silly, embrace that lighter side. And that playfulness can be incredibly rejuvenating.
It really can. Helps you de-stress, boosts creativity, helps you connect with that sense of wonder.
This has been such a deep dive already. We've covered so much, from ancient philosophy to modern psychology, practical tips and big existential questions. But we still have a few more sources to explore before we wrap up. Ready for the final leg of our journey?
Absolutely. I'm excited to see what other insights we uncover.
Stay tuned. We're about to go even deeper into the mysteries of happiness. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our happiness deep dive. We've explored a ton of really interesting ideas, but I'm curious to see how it all comes together. Like, if you had to boil it all down, what's the one key takeaway?
Well, I think what's really amazing is how all these different perspectives we've looked at, ancient and modern, they all point to this one essential truth. Lasting happiness isn't about what's happening outside of you, it's about how you relate to yourself and the world.
So it's not about getting that perfect job or the perfect relationship or, having a ton of money. It's about cultivating that inner peace and resilience and a sense of meaning that goes beyond all those external things.
Right. It's about recognizing that you actually have a lot more control over your happiness than you think. And it's not about pretending the challenges aren't there, but about having the tools to deal with them in a way that brings you peace.
Yeah, it's like building that inner sanctuary,
Then,
a place of strength that you can always access no matter what's going on around you. And we've talked about so many ways to do that. Reframing obstacles, finding meaning, mindfulness, gratitude, nurturing those relationships, finding your purpose, challenging those negative thoughts, self-compassion, taking care of your physical health.
and don't forget having fun. Life isn't just about, achieving things and checking things off your list. It's about enjoying the moment, connecting with your sense of wonder. being playful.
It's about remembering that we're human beings, not just human doings.
Yeah.
And part of being human is enjoying those lighthearted moments, having fun.
Exactly. And it brings us to a really important point. Happiness isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's an ongoing process of growing, learning, discovering yourself.
Like you're on this lifelong adventure, and the destination is always changing. The key is to just enjoy the ride, embrace the challenges, and celebrate the wins along the way.
I love that. It reminds us that happiness isn't something you find, it's something you create. It's a choice you make every day, in big ways and small ways.
So even when things are really tough, you still have the power to choose how you react, how you see things, how you find that joy and meaning.
Right. And that's so empowering. It means you're not helpless, even when things are hard. You can choose how you see things, focus on the good, and find ways to make a positive impact, even if it's something small.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much, but I'm sure our listeners are thinking, okay, what now? How do I actually put all of this into practice?
It's a great question, and the important thing is to remember there's no one-size-fits-all solution here. What works for one person might not work for another. It's about experimenting, trying different things, and seeing what works for you.
It's like we've been given this toolkit, and now we get to choose the tools that we need.
Exactly. And, well, start small. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one or two things that really speak to you and make them a part of your daily routine.
Build those habits, those happiness habits, one step at a time. And those small changes, they can really add up. As you start cultivating these habits, you'll start to see a shift in your perspective, how you feel overall. You'll be more resilient, and you'll find more joy.
And don't be afraid to reach out for support. There are so many resources out there, books, podcasts, online communities, therapists.
We're all in this together. You don't have to do it alone. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought-provoking question. If you could implement just one of the ideas we've talked about today, which one would it be? And why?
That's a great question to reflect on. I would encourage everyone listening to really think about what resonates with them, what feels like that missing piece.
What could make the biggest difference in your happiness?
Exactly. And there's no right or wrong answer here. It's about finding what works for you.
So everyone listening, take some time to think about this. Maybe journal about it, meditate on it, talk to a friend, and then take action. Pick that one thing and make it a part of your life.
And remember, the journey to happiness, it's not always a straight line. There will be ups and downs. But every step you take, you're moving closer to a life filled with more joy, more meaning, and more fulfillment.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into happiness. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical tools. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep choosing happiness.